Um, I think to see how we're going to get to 90 by 30, we really have to look at where we are now so we know, what is the challenge in front of us. I think we actually have everything we need right here and available to us to do what we need to do, and that the solution really is very, very simple. It's kind of beautiful in its simplicity. It's the difficulty in implementing it that I think is our challenge. So I'm going to give you some numbers because that's kind of what I do. I look at the statistics to figure out where we are, to frame the picture for you on a statewide level, and then move on from there to talk about the questions that we're asked to address. So in Oregon in 2010, these are the most recent numbers, the Department of Human Services responded to 71,886 reports of child abuse or neglect. That's a lot of calls. That's an increase from 2009, and it's been a pretty steady, gradual increase for a number of years. We investigated 29,021 reports of child abuse. So we made contact with families, face-to-face contact with families in 29,000 reports, and there were 11,188 children who were confirmed to have been abused or neglected in Oregon last year. And that's an increase from 2009. The largest single family stressor when child abuse or neglect was present is drugs and alcohol, 44% of the families. The next most common, domestic violence. 33% of our families present with domestic violence along with abuse and neglect. So what is the kind of abuse that's occurring in Oregon? 50% of the founded allegations, so we go out and we investigate and we either say, yes, this abuse occurred, that's a founded allegation, no it didn't, that's unfounded, or we can't quite figure it out given what's in front of us. We call that an unable to determine. So I'm just talking about the ones where we can actually say, we can substantiate that an incident of abuse or neglect occurred. 50% of those are in a category that we have in Oregon that's not real common around the country. It's called threat of harm, which means abuse has occurred and a child is at threat of further harm, meaning abuse occurring again. The second largest category for founded allegations of abuse or neglect is neglect. 31% of the families we encounter that have founded allegations are experiencing neglect. So if you look at those two categories, and within threat of harm, there is one of the threats of harm a family can experience is threat of harm and neglect. That is the second largest category of threat of harm. The first largest is threat of harm, domestic violence. So if you look at the category of threat of harm of neglect and neglect, if we can address the issues that challenge families that are experiencing that, that's 65% of child abuse in Oregon today. That's a long way towards 90 right there. So part of what I want to talk about is what's contributing to these families that are experiencing either neglect or threat of harm and neglect. 65% of the approximately 8,500 children that are in foster care currently came from families that qualified for TANF, which is cash assistance to needy families. So, and of those children, 64% are under the age of 6. So neglect's impacting families who are experiencing extreme poverty and young children, and have young children. And these families, the federal poverty level, which is the index used to determine whether or not you qualify for cash assistance, is $22,000 a year for a family of 4. That's not a lot of money. Above that, you don't qualify. It's still not a lot of money to support a family of 4. There was a recent study in Washington State where they asked families that had experienced maltreatment, and they asked their caseworkers the same question. What is it you think this family needs in order to address the issues that are challenging them and causing this maltreatment? So the caseworkers said, really, if parents had insight, parents don't want to abuse their children, they don't want to neglect their children. If they had insight as to what was causing that, perhaps they would be able to then figure out what tools would help them change their behavior. And you know what the families said? Food, shelter, and transportation. And then I can think about, have insight into why this occurred. But if my basic needs are not being met, it's extremely difficult to meet the basic needs of someone else. So I really think that informs us around what's happening to families and what we could do, when you think about that, what we could do to help them be better parents and the best parents they could be and not have their children experience maltreatment or neglect. So I want to say poverty is not the cause of child abuse. It is not. But it is the single best indicator of child abuse occurring because of the stressors it puts on families. When you have a lack of resources, poverty leads to a lack of resources, and a lack of resources can lead to neglectful parenting. Poverty can lead to stress. When you can't meet your own basic needs, it's stressful, and stress can lead to child maltreatment. So if we look at how we might impact the incidence of child maltreatment and neglect in Oregon, we really need to look at the challenges families face in meeting their own basic needs. So approximately 45% of the children who are removed from their homes are under the age of 6. So younger children, given that neglect and threat of harm and neglect are our largest categories, younger children are being significantly impacted by neglect in Oregon. And the dynamic between brain development and neglect is huge because these children's brains are growing and developing faster than any other time in their lives between the age of 0 and 6. So if you're experiencing neglectful environment over time during those years of brain development, it has a lifelong impact, which again I think informs us around where we need to start impacting families and children who are subject to the potential for neglect. So that's all my numbers. And actually I have a whole book of numbers if you want more, but we don't need to do them now. So what would things look like in 2030 if we've managed to reduce child abuse and interpersonal violence by 90%? I'm glad, first of all, that we were realistic and said only 90%. Because I actually didn't mean that to be a joke, but it does come out sounding a little odd. We will never eradicate child abuse. There simply are some people who are going to abuse children. And to think we could 100% eradicate child abuse would be unrealistic. Oh, 2 minutes, wow. Okay, 90%, I bet we could get there if we pay attention and work hard and keep the simplicity of the solution in front of us at all times. Specific to my business, child welfare will have redesigned our interventions with families to include an array of responses that better fit what the families say they need. Parents tend to know what they need to take better care of their children, and I think it's incumbent on us to create a system that has a continuum of an array of services and interventions and supports for families that allows a family to enter wherever they need to get what they need to better parent their children. Families' basic needs will be being met. They'll have income, food, shelter, and transportation. They'll be able to maneuver through our community the way we do so that they can meet the basic needs of their children. We will create, again, neighborhoods that support families and children and will be accountable to each other around the health of our community. And those neighborhoods will be concentrations of people committed to one another and to the well-being of each other as well as themselves. Schools can be the hubs of those neighborhoods. So we'll be at a place where we're funding our schools at a level where they can do that. Parents tend to congregate where their children spend their time. That's schools. So I think we really need to look at how we deliver services in terms of where our families will encounter them. No family in our community will be without a network of supports that are available. I think I already said there'll be a continuum of services and support that matches the needs of families, and no family, regardless of what they look like, how they act, or who they are, will be without access. The supports will be linguistically and culturally specific to the family and not the other way around. There'll be no stigma attached to where a family decides they need to enter the system. If they enter through child welfare, that's fine. If they enter through early intervention, that's fine. And if they enter through a resource center in their school, that's just fine. They know what they need. We need to allow them to come in where they can best meet their needs. I'm going to move quickly. So how can the university help? I think I have 10 seconds. You know, I attended this university, and I know it's an endless source of resources, brainpower, and motivation. And so I guess I would ask, how can the university help the community create this array of services and supports for families? Affordable housing, transportation, food, basic necessities, access to health services, early intervention, adequate educational services, and supports when violence occurs. And then how can the university help? The second question I have is, how can the university help create neighborhoods, groupings of individuals that care for one another? How can they help create neighborhoods in our community that provides these supports and the array of services? Thank you.